So we're going to take some questions from you, a couple of questions. Here you go.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for a nice presentation. I have two questions. It just refers to His Majesty, the King. Unfortunately, I think yesterday you were absent in the afternoon. Our Nigerian friends and colleagues, they discussed the issue of ethno-religious conflict in Nigeria. I wanted just to know first the rule of kings. I think there should be many kings within Nigeria, or just I think every province has a king, or maybe in every village. So how do you assess the effectiveness of kingdomship in different villages or provinces? Actually, I don't know. In Nigeria, and how the elders as well as the kings can impact the process of peace in negotiation between different ethno-religious ethnicity groups, Christians, Muslims, and other, religious people. This is my first question. My second question, you have somehow criticized the Western approach in bringing peace and security within countries. So it means you undervalue the process of peace and negotiation which is going on around the world, specifically in the United Nations. We had war in different countries, so massive killings. But these were the P5 countries and other interrelated agencies of the United Nations. They had effective approach in settling this conflict and wars in different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So could you tell them your name and where you're coming from?
Oh, sorry. So my name is Najibullah Ludin from Afghanistan. I'm a student in University for Peace, United Nations mandated University for Peace, Costa Rica.
Thank you. Your Majesty, I'm going to come back to you. Any other questions? One more. I hope you remember that. I will remind you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Isa Kawalia. I teach political science. I am Dr. Isa Kawalia. I teach political science in Islamic University in Uganda. Now, sometimes I scratch my head and I'm like, sometimes I get that feeling that cultural leaders are real power builders. The power, that soft power cultural leaders have, must be really taken as a very great importance in order to solve world communities. And then on the other side, I see political leaders as if they don't understand the power cultural leaders and religious leaders have. And we are here as academicians and very many people from different spectrums of life to see this kind of dichotomy, this divide between political leaders who guide and redirect our policies. Now, His Highness, the one in the middle, I've been talking about problems in that area where he comes from, where he's governing his people. And then political leaders are devastating the environment, and the cultural leaders have virtually nothing to do because they are powerless. What is it that we as academicians have got to do in order to advise policy so that there is this misconnect between political leaders and cultural leaders so that that divide is really bridged? Thank you very much.
Grace. Divide between political leaders and religious cultural leaders. Yes, to advise academics.
Yeah, so let's take this one first.
Oh, you want to take this one first?
Otherwise, I'm going to get...
Okay, after that, I'm going to take the last question from them.
Okay, thank you so much for these questions. You know, I came from a very faraway land, and there's a need to optimize or maximize my presence, at least in getting to know what is going on back there. Your question about the kings, traditional rulers in my country. Yes, there are traditional rulers in my country. And before we started this current governance style or system, there was some kind of equilibrium between ethnic nationalities. Yes, there used to be wars, but you fight the wars and get to some kind of truce, right? You get to some equilibrium. And so we're in some kind of equilibrium. And then there came a country called Nigeria. And Nigeria now boxes, for example, the German and maybe the Igbo man and perhaps the Isoko man into one state and puts the capital somewhere else. And they start a conflict. I don't know if you get my point. So, these new divides and this new system was designed to bring about conflicts, and the conflicts have remained unattended to. Because the government now decides to be on top of all of these, and they don't do anything. They don't have the capacity to even do anything. But they have the resources. They control the proceeds of every business in the state. But they do not channel the monies to ensuring that human beings live peacefully or coexisted peacefully. So that is where it is coming from. However, where any fairly human leader, I'm talking about the corporate leaders now, governor or president, decides to involve the traditional leaders, the issue is resolved there and then. There's not one where traditional leaders have been called to the table to say, look, this thing has taken too long. Can you help? That they've not been able to solve. So, as a matter of fact, someone creates these conflicts for a purpose. They like it. Traditionally, I can tell you about, not my kingdom now, there are some other kingdoms in Nigeria where the setting has been so clear for centuries. Now you come and you take someone who was not ordinarily supposed to be in charge and put him in charge as a traditional leader. Nobody respects him. In fact, he shoots his way to power. He rigs himself to power. He steals himself to power by thuggery, by crookery. So nobody sees him as a leader, actually. He is jealous of the traditional leader. And so all he tries to do is to try and undermine, more like the God-endorsed leadership of the land. So he gets crisis. I don't know if you get my point. So it's someone who wants to try to be legitimate where he's not. You've come to my home, you cut my neck, you take my wife. You want her to be loyal. How? It's not going to work, man. Exactly. It's not going to. So that is it. Now, the United Nations. I am not saying that the United Nations is not making efforts, but these leaders I just talked about in my country may also perhaps be in India. They may also be in Afghanistan. They may be in Somalia. They may be everywhere else, okay, where they've just managed to ascend the so-called political throne and want legitimacy. They are the ones in the UN. So in the General Assembly, you see them in the UN. And they've been advised by the CIA, by the KGB, by the MI6, and so on and so forth, on how to interact in that meeting. They could actually, if you look at what has triggered wars in this world recently, you may all see how they started. So counting a few gains here and there, perhaps when there is no visible financial benefit to the powers that be, may not be a success as far as I'm concerned. It is when you show that unconditional love for a vulnerable that I will see you as a big man and a responsible man. So far, the UN is doing more for those, in fact, they're doing more for benefit than for service to humanity. The Syrian crisis, go and look at it very clearly. Libya was at peace, even as with Gaddafi. There was an equilibrium in Libya until the CIA removed Gaddafi. And since then, there has been darkness in the void. So that is what the world powers have been doing. You can't say you do not know. They are written, they're in the books, in Western books for that matter. They are there. It is clear. If I have nothing to offer, nobody cares about me. But once I have oil, for example, that is the issue. So someone talked about oil and gas. Yes, the government enjoys the proceeds from oil and gas. As a matter of fact, some of us have been very loud advocates for local and world peace because we are like direct victims of the insensitivity of this world. In my palace, underneath my palace, we have the largest gas reserve that Shell has found in my part of the world. So if you sit on any chair in my palace, you will feel some bounciness. The gas kind of tries to push you, but not the money. Recently, I got to know that my kingdom is someone else's business concern. My kingdom is someone else's oil block. I did not even know. And it has been so for decades. Someone who does not know his left from his right, who does not have any engineering competence, has been signed an oil block, which includes my kingdom and other kingdoms. And then he looks for someone who has the expertise and say, come and go and drill oil here. And then they say, okay. So they concession some amount, maybe $5 billion US, just for having the paper that my kingdom is now his oil block. So he makes the money, I do not make the money. He makes the money, I get the pollution. He makes the money, I get the environmental damage. And the developed countries, the developed countries are complicit in all of these crimes. Shell, for example, is a European company. Chevron, American company. Mobil, American company. Elf, French company. Agip, Italian company. And so on and so forth. They are not up to 10 that have dominated the environmental oil and gas space of the Niger Delta for so long. In the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago, one company spilled oil. Yes, the president had to go there. They had to mop up this oil in a short period. They had to pay billions of dollars. They had to ensure that even the beds were restored. The beds that had oil stains on them were restored. The environment had to be restored. But in Nigeria, these same oil companies who do not pour a bottle of crude oil or diesel in any waterway anywhere will come to Nigeria and will throw caution to the winds and do anything they want to do. And the things they do, apart from damaging the environment, that means you can spill oil, there's no account. You can flare gas. They've been flaring gas for 60 years. I believe you heard me. 60 years, gas is even more expensive than crude. So you take crude, it's like a lion that kills a prey. You kill a gazelle or a giraffe. You eat the heart and allow the body, the carcass, the body to rot, to waste. That's what they do. You take the crude, it's convenient. You leave the gas, you flare it. You pollute the environment. You damage your ozone layer. Like the chicken coming to roost, right? So the ozone layer is affecting everyone now. It's not affecting me alone. My skin will have been slightly different from this, if not for 60 years of deliberate pollution. And we call it double standard. So because in Europe, you won't do that. In America, you won't do that. You come to Africa, you come to the Niger Delta, and you throw away all the rules of this world and do everything there. So that is what has been going on. The government, in connivance with these transnational companies, just so that they could have houses in Aberdeen and perhaps in New York and everywhere else so that you enjoyed a high-quality life, they connive with them and don't bother about what happens to the people or to the communities. So even though we are so rich, we tend to live like paupers. And we believe that that has to change if the world had human beings with blood running in their veins. But if the world is actually dominated by machine men and machine minds, then it may linger a while. But unfortunately, what goes round, they say, comes round. So it's affecting everybody. Like when I started reading about the shootings in the US, I was affected. I mean, when I hear these things, I cry. Because I empathize with the victims. If you've been a victim once, you will understand. For those who are not victims, it's statistics. 24 died, 30 were injured, 100 died, 1 million died. Can you imagine 770 million human beings are living under $2 a day? Poverty everywhere. A philosopher said some long time ago that there will have been shoes to go round if everyone will have just won a pair. But some have like 10,000 shoes. There was one lady who had 2 caravans of shoes, one world leader some time ago. 2 caravans, 40 by 40 foot long containers of shoes, one individual. And then look at me, look at him, no shoe. So that is the story. It is a work in progress. It is for the world to be more aware. And in case you do not know, Shell, until 2-3 years ago, will not employ you. No, it was just, I've just been dramatic. I couldn't quite use my foot at the time, but it was dramatic. It was nice. Some years ago, for you to be employed as a Shell worker, you will need to have a first class. So without a school in your home, how do you ever get a first class anyway? If you manage to even go to the university, your community will celebrate you. We'll celebrate you in my kingdom if you manage to come to Mercy College, okay? If you come here and you return, even if you come with a pass, we will applaud you for having gotten a degree. Because if you know where you're coming from, you will know that that is like climbing the tallest building in the world. So Shell and these oil companies were discriminatory in their employment of people, in giving opportunities. They were not. And so, if you're a first-class person in Shell or Ajib or Mobil, that means those in the PR department who manage information are also what? First class. So if you are a first-class manager of information and communities are agitating, how will the world hear? The world will not hear. So that's what they've been doing. They've been able to manage it such that what you think is that those persons there are savages, wild animals, good for nothing, do not deserve to live. As a matter of fact, they are better off dead than alive. But that's not the true story. We've experienced cases where, yes, Wilbur's was an American company, where some expatriates came to my community, lived there. About 4,000 men came to a local village that was less than 2,000 human beings at the time. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about now. 4,000 men to a community where you had children, women, and men, total 2,000. You're stayed by the houseboats. They were richer, more comfortable. Here was a vulnerable community. A man twice my height, thrice my size, had to put a child of 13 years in the family way. I'm talking about pedophilia, abuse of the girl child. And here was a man that had a family in his own home country. He disappeared, if anyone knew it. Leaving the woman there. The girl is a woman now. She's about 40-something years. Talking about in the early 90s. So these examples are everywhere. So people who ordinarily are supposed to behave well come there open-heartedly accepted to the communities. And by the time you disappear, you've abused the entire community. You've taken the chief's wife, you've taken the headmaster's wife, you've taken his daughter, you've taken everybody, because you have superiority of resources. The UN on peacekeeping has made it clear that if you are in a peacekeeping operation, you do not have to fall in love. Do not fall in love, because the table is not on an equal pedestal. It's not a flat platform. You have money, you have UN uniform, you have UN backing. The other person is vulnerable. Though beautiful she may be. But the oil companies do not follow this rule. So UN, you may take note of this and let the UN extend to oil companies that they must ensure that they too will not touch my sisters, especially the very young ones. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, even the UN in many African countries, and not just Africa, Haiti, there are many reports of UN abuse of girls and boys in many places. So I think recent reports, the UN is investigating some of these accusations, but they are real. We just find a way for the UN to resolve that. I'm going to take the last question because we have other panels, presentations. Whose question was, oh, that's yours, okay.
Wow. I ought to be on my feet as a sign of respect for my king and my queen. I'm from Nigeria, but we missed your presence yesterday because now when I was presenting, I presented my paper with my two other colleagues from Nigeria, and it was a nice session, but your contribution will have been of great assistance, and that is what I'm trying to do now. Yes, I take a course at the university. I'm a lecturer. I'm an associate professor, University of Benin, oil and gas. And most of my students are from the Niger Delta. At times, I even give them nicknames, action, and all those stuff, because they are really, really angry, passionate, and maybe I'll use the word frustrated, because of what is actually happening in their different villages where they are from and where the oil production is going on. Yes, as you have explained, sir, very good. It is true there is a thick romance between the IOCs and our government, that is international corporations, the IOCs, and the host country, which is Nigeria, and the government. And the people are in the middle, two elephants enjoying the day and the grass is suffering. But where lies the hope? Because that was the problem we had yesterday, the discussion we had yesterday. Where do we go to? Where do the people go now? Because like he raised, even yourself, sir, the Indigenous leaders are having issues. The government is not listening. No, their friend is the IOCs. So where do we go? What suggestion do you give us? And apart from that, sir, the issue that is going on now in Nigeria, the ethnic-religious problem. I know you are aware last week there was a problem, or 2 weeks ago in Delta, not too far from your place, of the Fulani men. How they broke out and started killing people. What if it comes to your domain, sir? How do you do it? Because now the Fulanis are not even being arrested. How do we handle it? I want to know if the indigenous leaders, your group, what steps are you taking to help out the people, so that you can maintain the respect of the people? From the story given even by the Somalian leader, the people respect and agree the indigenous leader, even as Yoruba is the same thing. But I remember there was a problem at Ife, in Ife Kingdom, and the Oba, thank God, very vibrant young king too, had to go to Abuja 3 times in less than 40 hours, trying to seek help because they were killing their people. And the people, they said to the forest, their local helpers, to go hunt down the Fulani men and to fight back, we're being killed. So the man has to keep going to Abuja, to the presidency, and nothing was coming out. How do you people help out as our indigenous leaders? Is there a way out? Is there hope at all? And lastly, sir, the people are about losing hope and faith even in their indigenous leaders. A lot of stories goes on about some of the leaders' behavior, conniving with the government, conniving with the IOCs against their own people. Thank you.
What is IOC?
We call it IOCs in my course, the oil and gas, the international oil corporations.
Thank you. International Oil Cooperation. Now, any questions from one student? You're there, okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlisha, and I am a student at Mercy College. And we're brought here by our human conflict class. And so you raised a very good point when you spoke on the deterioration of empathy in our community, especially in our generation now. And so what I wanted to ask is, how do you see, first of all, do you see empathy as something that can be taught to a culture, to a generation? And how do you see that happening from the perspective of leadership and kind of broadbanding that out into the community, into especially the younger generation? Because at the end of the day, we're seeing a revolution in that where the younger generation is now, their voices are being heard and they're able to make more of an impact in the community at large and in government as well. So how do we use that to kind of steer the trajectory of world peace?
Thank you. All right, Your Majesty. Who did you address your question to? Which king? The 2 of them? Okay, the 3 of them.
Okay, let me start with the IOC story. What is supposed to be central in leadership is sincerity of purpose. If you do not have sincerity of purpose, you cannot be a leader. You are just a pretender. And in that sincerity of purpose, there must be something you want to achieve. What do you want to achieve? Because of the effect of colonialism, and then now what we call neocolonialism, the African traditional settings have been under severe attack by the Western government structure. So the Nigerian government is Western. We have to understand that. The Nigerian government is Western, and true to the Western model that I've been talking about, if the governmental person, okay, let's say the president, I'm not particularly about the current president, but let's say the president of Nigeria is operating this style that I've been trying to criticize. Instead of, because of where he comes from, where perhaps, of course, it's not perhaps, where he is a subject of a traditional leader. because everyone is a son to one king or the other. Okay, so the king is there. You are now having a responsibility that is bigger than that of the king. But the truth is, you are a subject to the king, or a subject of the king. And so you try to want to get legitimacy. You want to secure respect from all the kings, even though they are superior to you. And so what do? You trigger crisis here, trigger crisis there. That is what the NIA does. Okay, so I'm using Nigeria now. So the Nigerian Intelligence Agency, copied from the CIA and the KGB. That's what they do. The herdsmen conflict is a political conflict. It's a deliberate conflict, using people's poverty and ignorance to legitimize their presence, to superintend over the commonwealth of Nigerians, particularly the Niger Delta oil. That is the objective. So if you're an academic, you must understand this. This is the problem there. And the reason why the problem is not going is the man, it's like a puppet. If I'm a puppet here and you're pulling the strings, what do you expect me to do? You pull to the left, I go to the left. You pull to the right, I go to the right, So that is what is going on. So the way forward is, you have to expose this contraption, right? The world needs to know that this is what is going on. Their voices actually have been louder. It is only about now that indigenous peoples are beginning to gain their voices. So once the world begins to know, and the searchlight comes on such leadership, then maybe like those insects that can't stand bright light, they will fizzle off. But as long as they seem to be in charge, and the world is listening to them and not hearing your voice, then this tragedy will go on for longer. So whether it is Boko Haram crisis, whether it is herdsmen crisis, is the same. The herdsmen, in fact, the Northerners or Fulanese, they are quite religious, isn't it? They listen. What was their name? One imam could tell 20 million people on a Friday to stop going rightwards, go left, and they will all go left. So if a pretender takes over the microphone and pretends to be an imam, and he says, now everyone go right, climb the fence, they will climb the fence. So they will commit a crime, they will murder people. So it is a story of pretenders pretending to be traditional heads and religious heads. That is a fact. And so if you look at it clearly, you will see a leader, a true leader like myself, should put his people first. That is the truth. So if you look around and the leader has not put his people first, he's a pretender. So call him president, call him king, call him whatever. If he doesn't have his people first, he is what? A pretender. Such is not my leader. Such can't even stand before me. Bring them before me, and they will run for cover. There they can't stand. Having said this, I'm so very happy with your question. It is a contemporary question. In fact, the most contemporary question. I would have been so unhappy if I had left here without a student speaking out. You must have heard of Malala, right? Yes. And you've heard of that is a Swedish girl that is campaigning for the environment? Yes. That is it. Once the world understands that the arsonists, in fact, once the arsonists and all understand that this house, you burn it down, you're going to die too, then sitting down on the fence, that docility that the large majority of the world, is at now, the larger world, about 95% or more of the world is essentially docile. In my country, there are less than 3,000 persons from independence to date that are in charge of the affairs of Nigeria. Less than 3,000 for the last 60 years. The current president was president in 1983, 84. Okay? He left in 85 or so, came back in 2015 after 30-something years. Most of his aides are as old itself. There are people who had actually exhausted their best. They are back in governance. In fact, they've been in charge. They've been governors, they've been commissioners. So what am I saying? The younger generation has to know what is going on. And the price that you'll be paying sitting down on the fence, the price you are going to pay is that you have a world that your neighbors will be so mechanical that it will be difficult for you to say you're a human being. Empathy is actually taught. If your society is empathetical, you will be. So we teach our children how to empathize from the cradle. The only thing that takes empathy away from our traditional setting is westernization. Unfortunately, that is what it is. That is the naked, the sad truth. Technology could have been used for the good of all, but unfortunately, it isn't so. People are using technology to undermine everyone else. So we could actually teach empathy. And before I drop the microphone, I read somewhere that in Japan, a child will be taught morals. Moral means how to greet somebody, be nice to people, for the first several years of his school life. And there will be no exam for it. He will be taught academics from his 4th grade. That is actually teaching morals. And that if you go to Japan and you are climbing the elevator, right? The chain elevator, all the Japanese will stay on one side and allow anyone else who wants to pass on the other side to pass. If a Japanese has to park his car somewhere, he will park it neatly such that the other man will also have a room. Not here. Not here. In my country, because of this same Western influence, you know, we do not manufacture cars in my country. We don't even manufacture phones. We do not. Everything we have, all the cars, millions of cars, are made abroad. I'm wondering whether we are human. How will human beings have so much appetite for something that is not theirs? And of course, it means that you have no history of that thing. And so your behavior about it will also not be very sociable or social. So someone could be driving a car and then he stops in the middle of the road and starts conversing with his neighbor who is also driving another car. He will think that he's just walking on the way, on the road. Because that's what we do. When you walk on the way, you see your friend, but how now? You start greeting. In his car, that's the way he's going to behave. He's not used to the fact that this vehicle is such that if you don't leave the way, you'll be blocking other road users. And then somewhere, I think it's Denmark and Finland, they say, they too, they teach in their early school, I think 20 hours per week. I think so, yeah, 20 hours per week. And until you are 7 years old, you don't have to go to school. And when you go to school, when you are fairly matured, you've learned morals at home, you go to school and you play with your neighbors. You invent games and play by yourselves. And you start doing exams only much later. And the difference between the rich, the very stinking rich, and the dead poor is like this. It is like the Benin of yesteryears, where no one is poor and no one is rich. So we either walk towards that or we wait for the Armageddon, the apocalypse that will soon come. Thank you. I
want to thank you all for being patient. The kings have the kings have the last word, so I'm not going to add anything to it.
Sorry, there's something I left out, which is the traditional greeting from my people. I will chant something, and you will answer he. Hi, Zon. Hi, Zon. Zon, baby. Hi, Agada. Agada, come at me. Onwa. That is our way of greeting people. I was supposed to have done that before I spoke, but now that we are concluding, that is also a way of greeting.
Thank you very much. All right, please, I want to invite you all. Let's take a picture with them here.